Yalta Conference was a conference held in the resort city of Yalta in the Crimean Peninsula of Russian or the USSR. And this was a tri-conference. This was a big three conference of Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill. They decided, or they took some major decisions for the wartime period, as well as a very important decisions or some important decisions for post-war period as well. And the decisions taken in this Yalta Conference have a lasting effect on the global politics. For example, the decision for the establishment of United Nations Security Council was taken in the Yalta Conference. The participants in the Yalta Conference were well aware about the situation on the Pacific theater as well as on the European theater. They required the swift participation in the Pacific theater. This was one of the important uh, topic or one of the important point on the agenda of the Yalta Conference. There were basically three main things that were discussed in the Yalta Conference. The first was the swift participation in the Pacific theater. Second was the decisions about Germany and Eastern Europe. And third, some important decisions were taken regarding United Nations as well. So, Allied leaders, when came to Yalta, know that an Allied victory in Europe was practically inevitable, but they were less convinced that the Pacific War was nearing an end. Recognizing that a victory over Japan might require a protracted fight, the United States and Great Britain saw a major strategic advantage to Soviet participation in the Pacific theater because they knew that they will win the war in Europe, but they were less convinced about the Pacific theater. They were thinking that with Japan it might take some more time or more time for war. Hence, it was really important to involve Sweden against Japan. At Yalta, Roosevelt and Churchill discussed with Stalin the conditions under which Soviet Union would enter the war against Japan, and all three, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin, agreed that in exchange for potentially crucial Soviet participation in the Pacific theater, the Soviet would be granted a sphere of influence in Manchuria following Japan's surrender. That is, as soon as Japan will surrender, Soviet will be given a considerable influence in Manchuria. For example, they will be given the railways of Manchuria and a port and some other things as well. So the Soviet involvement was crucial in Pacific theater because without Soviet involvement, it was really difficult to end the war in Pacific, and the Allies had made their mind that with Japan the war will go a little bit longer, and it was really important to involve Soviet so that Soviet would open a new theater or a new war front for Japan that will help allies to down Japan as soon as possible. The next thing was, or the next topic was the future of Germany and Eastern Europe. Uh, Regarding Germany, all three leaders agreed to include France in the post-war governing of Germany, and Germany would assume some but not all responsibility for reparations following the war. And that was further attempt to mitigate in Potsdam Conference by Truman. The Americans and the British generally agree that the future government of European nations, Eastern European nations, bordering the Soviet Union should be friendly to the Soviet regime. The Americans and the British agreed that the the nations in the Eastern Europe, which are at the borders of Soviet Union, should be friendly to the Soviet regime, and Soviet pledged to allow free elections in all territories liberated from Nazi Germany, and Soviet will ensure the free elections and the democratic principles in the liberated areas in Germany. And for Poland, it was said to include communists in the post-war government. So, to USSR, two very important things were granted. The first one was the Eastern European nations, which were in its neighbor, were asked to make friendly relations with Soviet regime, and in Poland, communists were allowed to become part of government in post-war era. The third important decision was taken about United Nations. In the conference, all parties agreed to an American plan concerning voting procedures in Security Council, which had been expanded to 5 permanent members following the inclusion of France, and each of these permanent members was to hold a veto on the decisions before the Security Council. This was a very important decision, but one of the most important decisions. And nowadays, this veto power make the United Nations Security Council as the most powerful organization in the world. And about the veto power, the decision was taken in the Yalta Conference. Initially, the Yalta Conference was seen as a celebrity, and Roosevelt was thinking that the wartime cooperation with Sweden will continue in post-war period as well. But this could not last for long, because after the death of Roosevelt, when Truman became the president of USA, he reversed most of his policies. He started to criticize USSR and uh, look towards USSR with not with an unconfidential way, and this pushed both powers far from each other, and the environment which was set at Yalta, the friendly environment between USSR and USSR which was set in Yalta, could not last for long. Thank you for joining. Take care. Goodbye.